The very first FA Cup final, just like the first Test match, was played here at Kennington Oval. The date was the 16th of March, 1872, the crowd around 2,000, and the admission charge £1 shilling. Those people saw the Wanderers beat the Royal Engineers by 1-0. And the only goal, the first ever in an FA Cup final, was scored quirkishly by a man playing under a pseudonym. Now, his real name was MP Betts, but he appeared on the Wanderers team sheet as A.H. Checker, signifying that he was a Harrow Checker, in other words, a member of an exclusive old Harrovian club. The Wanderers, you see, drew their players from men who'd been at either public school or university. In goal, they had C.W. Alcock, then the secretary of the Football Association, and the moving spirit behind the start of the FA Cup. He was part of a three-man delegation who went out to buy the original trophy at a cost of around £20. The Cup was won outright in 1878 when the Wanderers won it for the third year running, but they returned the trophy and Blackburn Rovers also had 3 consecutive wins. That Cup never returned south, because when Aston Villa won it for the second time in 1895, they put the trophy on display in a Birmingham shop window, from which it was stolen one night in September. Even the offer of a £10 reward failed to bring back the Cup, and it wasn't until 1958 that a newspaper unmasked the thief who melted the Cup down to make counterfeit half-crowns. An exact replica was made, and the second trophy was used for just 15 years, until this final in 1910 between Newcastle United and Barnsley. Newcastle, after having lost 3 finals in 4 years, won this one in a replay. And after this, the trophy was presented to the legendary Lord Kinnaird, who played in a record 9 finals and had completed 21 years as president of the FA. He was a leading social figure of his time, as his grandson, the present Lord Kinnaird, recalls.
They used to call out, "Here comes old Canary," that'll liven the game up a bit. He was never one for sitting still.
And according to the pictures we've got of him, he dressed very much in the costume of the time, didn't he?
Yes. How much it was a costume of the time, I don't know, because I haven't seen pictures of many others, but he was never a conformist. He dressed how he wanted. Whether he dressed like the others, I don't know, but if he didn't, it wouldn't bother him.
Are there any stories that you've been told about the way he behaved at matches or when he'd played in matches? Any little anecdotes like that?
Well, I only discovered this the other day. He was asked by an old Harrovian captain, "Shall we play fair or shall we have hacking?" His lordship eagerly replied, "Oh, let's have hacking," and hack he did. And in those days, putting the boot in, it says here, was viewed merely as manly enthusiasm, but it worried Lord Kinnaird's mother. And Major Mandarin, then president of the FA, reassured her that the only broken leg Lord Kinnaird would come home with would be someone else's. So I don't think he was, I think he played to the full.
So Lord Kinnaird's family still have that cup, and for the 1911 final, a third trophy was at stake. It was made in Bradford, and the first winners were Bradford City in their first and only final. The cup they won is still used today. The next landmark was a permanent home for the cup final. In 1923, it went to Wembley, a new stadium built to hold 100,000. But twice as many crashed the gates and left the stewards, including one Stanley Rouse, an impossible job.
In those days, no one had taken note of how many people were coming by train, how many coaches. They told that everybody would get in, new Wembley, large, everybody could, and of course they couldn't have 200,000 people. And the inside of the stadium was just a mass of people. And that was the year, of course, of the White Horse. And the policeman was supposed to have helped. And he didn't help any more than the other policemen on the horses, but being on the White Horse, he was most conspicuous. And the king arrived. And then, of course, people did, when he waved to the crowd to move back, they did get down to the touchline. I remember somebody coming in, a man coming in with his 2 sons and asking me, he said, "I'll give you £5 if you can get me out of here." It's the first time I've ever been offered money to get out of a ground. I've been offered money to get in.
Eventually, the players of West Ham and Bolton Wanderers came out and got the game started. and to Bolton's David Jack went the distinction of scoring the first goal in a Wembley final. They even had a camera in the sky in 1923, and down on the ground, Bolton's J.R. Smith made the game safe with the second goal. The crowd poured on again to see the cup presented by King George V to Bolton's captain, Joe Smith. It was just a foretaste of the Wembley drama to come. The first major Wembley controversy came in 1932, when Herbert Chapman's Arsenal, wearing the white shorts, took the lead after 15 minutes against Newcastle through outside left Bob John. But as the King and Queen looked on, it was Newcastle's equaliser that caused the trouble. Was the ball out of play when Richardson crossed from the right for Allen to score? Certainly Arsenal thought so, but before the days of television replays and slow motion, it was impossible to tell. Or was it? A still photograph taken from a different angle suggests Arsenal were hard done by, with the whole of the ball clearly over the line. The goal stood and Newcastle won the cup. In 1938, another argument. It's Preston in white against Huddersfield in stripes. And in the last minute of extra time, with the score 0-0, Huddersfield's Alf Young brought down Preston's George Much. But was the tackle inside the area? The Daily Express tried to prove it wasn't, but the referee awarded the first cup final penalty at Wembley, and Much picked himself up to score off the crossbar. He was still dazed, but Preston and their fans were delighted. Their team included Bill Shankly. 10 years later, a similar incident, the classic 1948 final between Blackpool in white and Manchester United. It's Stan Mortensen brought down there by United's Allenby Chilton. But this time, there seems little doubt that the tackle did take place outside the area, with Mortensen fooling the referee by falling inside. No penalty has been missed in a Wembley FA Cup final, but although Eddie Shimwell put Blackpool ahead from the spot, it made no difference to the final result. Matt Busby's inspired United came back to win 4-2, and their captain Johnny Carey lifted the cup. Busby was recovering from the Munich air crash when United met Bolton in the 1958 final. Here, the controversy was over Bolton's second goal, when Nat Lofthouse charged goalkeeper Harry Gregg into the net with the ball. No foul was given, despite United's protests, and Bolton won 2-0. It meant that Lofthouse, Bolton's favourite son, had scored both goals, and as their captain, it was he who received the trophy. The cup is littered with stories of players and clubs who've been to Wembley 2 years running, and it happened to Charlton Athletic immediately after the Second World War. Their celebrated goalkeeper, Sam Bartram, was in the team beaten by Derby in 1946, but which went back to win the cup against Burnley the following year. Sam recalls that in those days of demob suits and ration books, the cup had its coincidences.
Well, the first one was when the ball burst. Dally Duncan come in from the left and he hit this ball, and as it landed in my arms, it just went flat, and I suddenly realised if I didn't do something about it, the referee would stop the game and bounce it on the line. So I just threw it straight out to the touchline where it flopped down, and of course that have a bounce up on the touchline, you know. And the second thing in the match was an own goal against us, and then we equalised, which was Bert Turner scored both goals, you know. And of course we had to go into extra time, and of course they murdered us in extra time. Of course they had a good side.
Of course, you came back the following year and beat Burnley, and there is a story that the ball burst again, but perhaps you could clarify that.
Yes, well, it didn't actually burst the second time. It went down very, very soft, and, you know, it was like a pudding, and of course they couldn't play on with it, so the referee had to take it off and change it again, you know, and that, of course, we just played on, and of course went on to win in extra time. There was about 6 minutes to go, and there was a long cross came over from the right. Don Welsh went up to head it, missed it, and Chris Duffy ran in and swung his right, and of course it was in, and of course Chris turned and ran, you know, and that was, you know, that was it. And I thought, well, this is it. It must be our day today, you know. But 6 minutes was an awful long time waiting for the whistle to blow for a final.
A more significant double came in 1961 when Tottenham Hotspur, Super Spurs, became the first team this century to win the League Championship and FA Cup in one season.
Smith, he took that magnificently. A great goal. A beautiful goal. Smith inside to White, and out of Smith, number 9. In comes Dyson, he scored!
Danny Blanchflower's team emulated the feat of Preston in 1889 and Aston Villa in 1897. But it was only 10 years before the double was done again. Spurs' North London neighbours Arsenal, having clinched the championship on Tottenham's ground, were at Wembley 5 days later to play Liverpool in the 1971 final. The match went to extra time, Arsenal in yellow shirts.
Highway. Oh, it's scored! Highway's done it! 1 minute of extra time, and Highway sold the dummy to Bob Wilson. Oh, it's going to be the equaliser! Yes! Liverpool relax, and what a terrible, terrible mistake. To George. He scored! George has done it! George has done it! A tremendous shot!
Now it was the turn of Frank McClintock, twice a loser with Leicester City, to lift the cup. The nature of Wembley finals has suggested the favourites often buckle under the strain. In 1939, as Hitler's troops marched across Europe, Wolverhampton Wanderers marched to Wembley, where they were strongly fancied to beat Portsmouth in the white shorts. Instead, Portsmouth won 4-1 and proved what was to become a cup final cliché. It's merely a matter of who plays well on the day. Jimmy Guthrie, a great fighter for players' rights, was the winning captain. The biggest shock in recent years came in 1973, when the holders, Leeds United, met second division Sunderland. Ian Porterfield's first half goal put Sunderland ahead, but the match will be better remembered for arguably the greatest save in all the 99 cup finals. It was made in the second half by the Sunderland goalkeeper, Jim Montgomery.
Well, it built up on the left-hand side, and the ball was knocked in, and Cherry came in from the back stick and got a diving header in, which I pushed to one side. I don't know, just a reaction thing. Fortunately for me, I got a hand to it, hit the bar, and when I did turn around, there was Dick Malone kicking it clear, while the Leeds players are still appealing for a goal, you know. But at the time, you didn't think how important it was.
Leeds are really pushing forward. Cherry, brilliant save, and Lorimer makes it one each. No.
My wife and people in the stand didn't even know I'd made a save, you know, and I think even the cameras and that, they didn't realise I'd saved it until they'd went over the video at the end of it.
Stokoe, the first to congratulate Montgomery.
It was emotional, you know, it was really emotional, and I don't think there's ever been a cup final like it.
Nor surely a smaller cup-winning captain than Sunderland's Bobby Kerr. 3 years later, David beat Goliath again. Second Division Southampton foxed Manchester United, the only goal struck by Bobby Stokes, one of the cup's unlikely heroes. The Second Division's third success in 8 years came 12 months ago, when West Ham beat an Arsenal side playing a record third consecutive FA Cup final at Wembley. Trevor Brookings' headed goal was a rarity in itself, the 7th time in 13 finals that one goal was enough to win the cup. Arsenal had also been at Wembley 50 years earlier, when the German Graf Zeppelin flew over the stadium as they beat Huddersfield 2-0 in the final of 1930. Arsenal indeed hold the record of 10 FA Cup final appearances at Wembley. But Newcastle United have been in 11 FA Cup finals overall, 6 of them at Wembley. And in the 1950s, they won the cup 3 times in 5 years. The Geordie the fans worshipped played in all 3 finals. War Jackie Milburn, who scored 3 very different goals.
Very different, but the best one I scored at Wembley was when I ran through from the halfway line, you know, because believe you me, John, when you know the world's watching you and the world's chasing you and you've got to run the length of half the length of the field, and against a good goalkeeper like George Farm, it's very difficult, but I put a few short runs in and got him going the wrong way, and I just slipped it into net. As a matter of fact, I never saw that ball go into net. I knew it was there as soon as I touched it, but what a sigh of relief, John, because if I had missed that one, my goodness me, or had my head cut off, I would have done.
Now, what about the second one?
Well, the second one was it was a bit of a fluke in a way, because when Ernie Taylor got the ball from Tommy Walker, I shouted for him to backheel it, and Ernie hesitated just slightly. And when he backheeled it, I was slightly over the top of the ball, and I headed. Unfortunately, it kept low, but if I had got it when I had wanted it, possibly it'd been in the stand, you know. So it came off right, but when I ran back after scoring that goal, Stan Mortensen, he come running over and shook hands. He says, "Jack, that deserves to win any final." He says, "I hope you win." He says, "That was a brilliant goal."
Let's go on to 55 now, because you scored again that year, didn't you, in, what, 45 seconds?
45 seconds. And it wasn't a fluke, John. Everybody gets on to me. I was never very good in here. I've got to be honest about this. But I won a corner kick early on. I ran half the length of the field and slid, and the ball went for a corner. Len White took the corner, and it came over, and I was unmarked. I couldn't believe it. And all I had to do was thrust the neck muscles, and the next thing I knew, it was flying past Bert Troutman, and that was a wonderful thrill for me. And of course, I've never heard the end of it in Newcastle. Never heard it, because I couldn't head the ball very well, and they keep talking about it now. It gives me a lot of pride, though.
The 1966 final best illustrated the sharp unreality of the Cup. Everton's Mike Trebilco wasn't even named in the match programme, but with his side 2 goals down to Sheffield Wednesday, he it was who launched one of the most furious comebacks in Cup final history.
Now a chance for Trebilco. He scored. Trebilco. A goal is equalised.
Everton level at 2-2, and one supporter who couldn't control his excitement was Eddie Cavana. He became notorious for his dash across the pitch pursued by police, but it was merely an interlude in the eventual defeat of Sheffield Wednesday and the misery of the man whose mistake led to Everton's winning goal, Wednesday's left half, Jerry Young.
Well, I can vaguely remember Colin Harvey, I think it was, played a long ball out of Everton defence, and I went to trap it. Now, I think it was my right foot, which is my weaker foot, and that's the only possible reason I can think why it slipped through for Derek Temple to run onto, you know, and it obviously it ran sweetly for him and badly for me.
Making it almost impossible for Wednesday to create space, and now a great chance, a bad mistake by Jerry Young. It's step ball, and it's the first goal. Oh, what a tragedy for Jerry Young.
It was a bit sad, but that's it.
In the dressing room afterwards?
Well, ironically, Harry Catterick, who was manager of Everton, had been my manager at Sheffield Wednesday. I don't know whether he was having a go at me, but he brought the cup filled with champagne straight to me, you know. And it tasted all right.
The champagne also went flat for names like Alan Ball, with Everton and Arsenal a Wembley loser. And for Malcolm MacDonald, who was twice on the losing side in the 70s, when Super Mac was cruelly labelled Super Flop. They called it the Wembley Hoodoo in the 1950s, a succession of injuries in the days before substitutes, the most dramatic of which was Bert Troutman's broken neck as he kept goal for Manchester City against Birmingham in 1956. Troutman played on and got a winner's medal. But the following year, Manchester United's goalkeeper Ray Wood was less fortunate. His cheekbone was fractured in that sickening collision with Aston Villa's Peter McParland. Wood went off, and with him went Manchester United's chance of doing the double in 1957 with the team known as the Busby Babes. A few months later, 7 players lost their lives at Munich. 1959, it's Nottingham Forest in dark shirts against Luton Town.
Wilson's in the middle. Words hanging back. Get it, great goal.
But the scorer of that goal, Roy Dwight, Elton John's cousin, was later stretchered off with a broken shin bone and watched the rest of the match from a hospital bed. Forest still won 2-1. Cup final crowds have got used to seeing late goals. In 1935, the score was 2-2 between Sheffield Wednesday and West Bromwich Albion when Wednesday's left winger Ellis Rimmer scored 2 goals in the last 3 minutes. That gave Wednesday victory and took the silver trophy to the Steel City. But for West Brom, there was recompense in 1954 when Frank Griffin scored the winner against Preston just 2 minutes from time. 10 years later, in 1964, Preston were on the receiving end again. Now a second division club, they had led West Ham twice, but with the score 2-2, there was drama in injury time.
Getting to it in the dying seconds. Braybrook, are we going to have a sensational ending? Yes, we are! It's the goal! And that must be the winner!
A goal by Ronnie Boyce and a young Bobby Moore received the FA Cup. The craziest last 5 minutes came in 1979, when Arsenal in dark shorts led Manchester United 2-0. And then Gordon McQueen scored for United, and there were 2 twists in the tail.
United have scored with just under 4 minutes to go. Everybody was waiting upfield, and they still are for United. Coppell. McElroy's through. McElroy is through. And McElroy has done it. What drama here. McElroy for United. It's 2-2. They've scored twice in a minute. There's a minute left on the clock. Brady for Arsenal. Right across. Sunderland. It's there. It's 3-2. Arsenal are back in front for Alan Sunderland. United have possibly thrown it away within seconds of getting it back.
Strong stuff that may have been, but for sheer romance, the 1953 final stands alone. They called it Matthews' match, with the maestro at number 7 apparently destined for his 3rd loser's medal when Blackpool trailed 3-1 to Bolton. That cross of his led to a goal from Mortensen, and now Blackpool were just 1 goal behind. This was one of the first finals televised by the BBC, and the commentator was Kenneth Wolstenholme.
By our watch, 2.5 minutes to go. Bolton 3, Blackpool 2. And of course, we make it about 4 minutes extra time has to be played, but we can't guarantee that Mortensen going to take it. Yes, there he is, Mortensen. It's a lovely goal. The man who's really fighting for his cup medal. Could he score the winning goal now himself? It's there. Perry.
So Stanley Matthews had the footballer's most priceless possession, an FA Cup winner's medal.
To look back on them, you know, it's something, you know, something to look back on. So that's the one we got when we first played Derby County. That was the runners-up, and I was lucky enough to come and get a winner's medal. And they always say, you know, if you got a cup final.